Within minutes, the little girl was rushed into the emergency room. A few moments later, the doctor came out with a heavy expression, delivering a sentence that froze Beth's entire world. Your daughter needs urgent surgery, but it costs $300,000, and it must be done within 6 hours. Otherwise, she won't survive. $300,000. 6 hours. Her daughter's life came with a price Beth never imagined she'd have to face. In that moment, time stood still, and a poor, ordinary mother, utterly invisible to the world, was forced to make the most extreme decision of her entire life. What would you do if the world turned its back on you, but your daughter's heart was in your hands?
Before the clock began ticking against her daughter's life, Beth already knew the bitter taste of despair. She was born in an old wooden house, in a village forgotten by time, surrounded by dirt roads and indifferent glances. Her mother was a broken woman, shattered by alcohol, by life, and by the wrong kind of love. Her father? A name never spoken, a presence that never existed. Beth grew up learning to fend for herself, and far too early. While other children dreamed of birthday parties and new dolls, Beth dreamed of bread on the table and a night without screaming. Many nights there was no dinner. Many nights there was no silence either. Her childhood passed like an unrelenting storm. By the age of 12, Beth already knew more about pain than most adults would dare to admit. She went to school hungry, wearing a torn uniform and a vacant stare. But she endured. A small flame still burned inside her, refusing to die out. That flame, however, was struck hard when, at 15, Beth found her mother collapsed on the kitchen floor, pale, still, cold. The official cause of death was never confirmed, but Beth knew. Alcohol had won. With no relatives, no direction, and not a single coin in her pocket, Beth had to drop out of school and find work as a cleaner in a small local market. She slept in the back storage room where rats competed for space with cardboard boxes. It was during this dark time that she met the man who would change her life, but not in the way she hoped. He was handsome, older, full of sweet promises. For the first time, she felt seen, important, loved. Or at least she thought it was love. But the mask fell too quickly. Within 6 months, the sweet words turned to shouting, then into slaps. Beth was afraid, but she had nowhere to go. Until one day, she found out. She was pregnant. And despite the gray, cruel world around her, something inside her began to shine. Lily. That's when Beth discovered a new kind of love. A love that doesn't hurt, doesn't lie, doesn't leave. A love that gave her the strength to wake up every day and fight. When Lily's father found out about the pregnancy, he disappeared. And Beth didn't shed a single tear. All she wanted was to protect that child, to give her everything she never had, a home, a chance. Beth scraped together what little she had and moved to another town, a small village still, but with better opportunities. She eventually landed a permanent job as a maid in a massive mansion in the wealthy district. The owner was a well-known billionaire in the region, a cold, strict, methodical man. But the job came with stability, housing, and food. Everything Beth needed to ensure her daughter could grow up with dignity. The mansion was a world apart. The contrast between the imported carpets and the hard mattress in the servants' wing where Beth slept was almost comical. But she never complained, never. Her focus was Lily. Every morning she dressed her little girl with care, braided her golden hair, and took her to preschool before starting work. Lily was cheerful, full of energy, and her smile seemed to light up even the darkest days. But then something began to change. It started with small complaints, a headache here, unusual tiredness there, Beth thought it was just a cold or stress from school. But then came the nosebleeds, frequent and frightening. Lily started fainting now and then. Beth lived in a state of constant alert. She rushed to the ER whenever her daughter had a crisis. The doctors said more tests were needed, but without expensive diagnostics, nothing was conclusive, and Beth couldn't afford them. Still, she never stopped trying. On every day off, every extra hour she could manage, she searched for help. But the system was slow, and time merciless. That morning had seemed normal. Beth took Lily to preschool as usual. Her daughter looked paler than usual, but she insisted she felt fine. "Mommy, don't worry. Today I'm going to play in the little house at school, okay?" Beth smiled and kissed her forehead. "If anything happens, Mommy will come get you right away." She didn't know those words would turn out to be prophetic. On her way back to the mansion, Beth decided to stop by the bank. She had just received her weekly wages and wanted to pay the bills before she forgot. But before she could reach the branch, she was ambushed by two men on a motorcycle. One of them jumped off and violently snatched her purse. Beth tried to hold on but was shoved hard against a wall. She fell to the ground, scraping her arms. The thief took everything: documents, money, cell phone. All the security Beth had, gone in seconds. Dizzy and shaken, she still tried to run after them, but it was hopeless. With tears in her eyes, she walked back to the mansion, bloodied and stumbling. She barely had time to catch her breath when the school called. Lily had fainted again. She was bleeding from the nose and vomiting. Beth dropped everything and ran. She didn't even think to ask her boss for permission. She caught the first bus and rushed to the school. There, she found her daughter in critical condition, held by the teacher, her little eyes rolling back. Beth carried Lily in her arms to the city's emergency room, sobbing. That's when the bomb dropped. After the urgent exams, the doctor looked at her with sorrow. He said it was serious. Lily had a neurological condition that required immediate surgery, a rare, expensive procedure, and it had to happen within 6 hours. $300,000. Beth's knees fell out. "Doctor, $300,000? She whispered, trembling. I know it sounds impossible, but without the surgery, she won't make it." Beth held her daughter's hand. It was cold, small, fragile, but still alive. What does a mother do when the world says no, when time becomes the enemy, when the life of the person you love most comes with a price and you don't have a single coin in your pocket? She looked at the clock. She had 6 hours. 6 hours to change everything or lose everything.
The clock ticked like a cruel enemy. Every second seemed to mock Beth as she tried desperately to find a solution. She was still holding Lily's hand, now connected to machines, her breathing shallow, her face pale. The doctor had been clear. The surgery had to begin within 6 hours, or Lily's brain would suffer irreversible damage, or worse. Beth stepped out of her daughter's room, her body trembling. She had no phone, no money, no documents. Everything had been stolen in the robbery. She couldn't even call someone, if there was even anyone to call. The world felt like it was collapsing around her, and yet she remained on her feet. She ran back to the mansion where she worked. As soon as she passed through the gates, her face still bruised from the attack and her eyes red from crying, she was met with a sight that cut her even deeper. 2 staff members were tossing her belongings onto the sidewalk like trash. Her suitcase, her neatly folded clothes, Lily's sketchbooks, even their worn shoes. Everything was being thrown out with complete indifference. Beth ran toward them desperate. "What are you doing? That's my stuff. My daughter is in the hospital." The butler didn't bother to reply.
He simply pointed to the top of the stairs, where her boss stood watching everything with his arms crossed, the billionaire. A man known in town for his wealth, influence, and coldness. He slowly descended the marble steps, unhurried, as if each step was a reminder that Beth's time there was over. "Beth, you left in the middle of your shift, without notice. This is the 4th time in less than a month. That's unacceptable." "My daughter. The school called. She fainted again. I rushed to the hospital. She's going to die if she doesn't have surgery. Please, I need your help," Beth sobbed. "I'm sorry," he replied, his eyes cold as stone. "I can't keep employees who constantly disappear during work hours. And no, I won't pay for the surgery." It was as if the ground vanished beneath her. Beth dropped to her knees on the sidewalk, her hands clasped as if in prayer. "Please, I'm begging you. You're the only one who can help. I'll do anything. I'll scrub the floors of your house for 100 years, but please, save my daughter." The billionaire didn't answer. He simply turned his back and walked into the mansion, leaving Beth there, collapsed, like a forgotten shadow. She didn't know what was worse, seeing her daughter fighting for her life in a hospital bed, or realizing the world simply didn't care. There was no one to turn to, no relatives, no friends with resources. Time was running out. With every passing minute, Lily's body grew weaker. Beth thought about everything she had done to protect her daughter. Every sleepless night, every penny saved, every story she told to shield Lily from the pain of the world. And now, when she needed the most, she had nothing. She wandered aimlessly through the city streets. Her head throbbed, her thoughts tangled. If I kneel in a church, if I scream in the town square, will anyone hear me? That's when she passed in front of a small second-hand toy shop. The window was old, dusty, and then she saw something. A gun. But it wasn't real. It was a toy, a replica, tossed in a bin full of old items, beside a plastic helmet and a pirate's sword. Beth walked into the shop, mesmerized. She picked up the toy gun. It was light, but it sent chills down her spine. Her heart began to pound. She looked at the vendor, an old man distracted by an antique radio. "How much is this?" "Oh, that one? $2. It's kinda broken, but good for a costume." Beth searched her pockets. She found a few old coins tucked in the lining of her jeans, change forgotten from some previous purchase. She paid, walked out of the shop with the toy wrapped in a brown paper bag. Outside, the sun was already starting to set. It felt hotter than usual, or maybe it was just Beth's body burning in despair. She sat for a moment on a park bench and stared at the toy. She thought of Lily, her shallow breaths, her fading smile. Her life slipping away. "I'm not a criminal, but I'm a mother." The thought repeated like a mantra. She had no choice, or at least she couldn't see any. It was now or never. Beth went to the town's bank, a small old building with 2 glass doors and a faded blue sign. She walked in with shaky steps, the toy gun hidden beneath her coat. The security guard was an elderly man, sitting and reading a newspaper. There were 3 customers and 2 female employees. One stood at the counter. The atmosphere was quiet, almost sacred. Beth took a deep breath. 1, 2, 3. "This is a robbery!" she shouted, raising the toy gun. Her hand shook so much she nearly dropped it. Everyone turned in shock. "I don't want to hurt anyone. I'm not a criminal. I just need $300,000. The old security guard raised his hands, confused. The woman at the counter discreetly pressed a button under the desk, the silent alarm. Now the police knew. Beth locked the front door and turned to those inside. "Please, go into that room next door. I don't want to hurt anyone. Just the woman at the counter stays here with me. Quickly!" They obeyed, frightened. Beth locked the door to the small room where the hostages now were and returned to the desk. "I know this sounds crazy, but my daughter is going to die. I need that money now. I can't wait." The teller, a blonde woman in her 30s, tried to stay calm. "The money's in the vault. I'll open it, but it takes time. It's a security protocol. There's a timed system." She was lying, buying time. Beth paced back and forth. She cried, she screamed, she murmured prayers. The toy gun trembled in her weak hands. "Please, please, God, don't let me lose my daughter." And then, the sirens echoed outside. The police had arrived. Beth crouched behind the counter when she heard the sirens. The wail of the police cars echoed through the small town like the harbinger of an inevitable tragedy. On the other side of the locked door, voices stirred, guns were cocked, megaphones readied. She slowly stood and looked through the bank's glass. Officers surrounded the building, shields raised, eyes tense. One of them stepped forward cautiously, speaking into a megaphone. "Ma'am, this is Captain Lewis from the State Police. We're here to make sure no one gets hurt. Please release the hostages and let's talk." Beth squeezed her eyes shut, fighting back tears. She wasn't a criminal. She didn't want to hurt anyone. But her daughter was dying, and no one seemed to care. The teller was still there, silent, watching every move of the desperate mother. "You don't understand," Beth shouted toward the door. "My daughter, she's 5 years old, 5. She's going to die in 3 hours if she doesn't have surgery. They said $300,000. How am I supposed to get that? How?" Outside, the captain motioned for the team to back off slightly. He grabbed the bank's phone, which was still connected to central operations, and dialed in. The phone at the front desk rang. Beth eyed it cautiously. She picked it up with trembling hands. "Hello? This is Captain Lewis. I want to hear you out. I know you don't want to hurt anyone. Please, let me help you. Tell me what happened." Beth hesitated. What did she have to lose? The world had already turned its back on her. So she told him. She spoke of her difficult childhood, her alcoholic mother, the loneliness, the fear, her daughter, the struggle to survive, the unfair firing, the robbery, the hospital news, the impossible surgery. She spoke without a filter, with pain, with truth, with heart. On the other end, the officer remained silent for a few seconds. Then he said, "Beth, I have a daughter too. I can't imagine what you're going through, but you have to trust me. We're going to figure this out." Beth didn't respond. Her eyes were fixed on the bank's television, still on a local news channel. The image of the bank's front entrance appeared live on the screen. The reporter spoke in a grave tone. "We're live downtown where a woman with a weapon is holding people inside the bank. Preliminary information suggests the motive is heartbreaking. The woman was allegedly trying to steal money to pay for an urgent surgery for her critically ill young daughter. Witnesses say she hasn't harmed anyone and appears emotionally distraught. The nation is watching this moving story unfold." Beth covered her mouth in shock. Her story was out there. For the first time, someone was listening. Soon, social media exploded. People started commenting, sharing, speaking out. It was unlike anything they'd seen before. A mother driven to desperation, begging for help to save her daughter. A local influencer posted, "This woman isn't a criminal. She's a mother, a warrior. If each of us donates $1, we can save this child." And that was the spark. Within minutes, a crowdfunding campaign went live. Thousands began donating, $5, $10, $100. Messages like, "For Lily, we're with you, Beth.
"You're an incredible mom," flooded the donation page. Inside the bank, Beth watched the live report update in real time. The donation counter was already climbing into the tens of thousands. She fell to her knees, crying. "They're helping me! They're actually helping me!" The teller stepped closer, gently. "You're a good mother, Beth. People see that now. Not everyone is cruel." Beth looked into the woman's eyes, her smile trembling. "I just wanted her to live. I just wanted her to have a chance." Meanwhile, in the back room, the hostages began to hear whispers of what was happening outside. An elderly man softly knocked on the door. Ma'am, we're not mad at you. We understand. Let us out. No one's going to hurt you." Beth hesitated. "If I let you go, do you promise not to run, not to make a scene?" "I promise," he said gently. "I'm a father too. I understand." She unlocked the door. One by one, the hostages exited quietly, their eyes filled with emotion. Some gently touched Beth's shoulder in support. One woman whispered, "It's going to be okay, brave mama." Beth remained there, now alone. The toy gun lay on the floor. She looked again at the television. The donation counter read $243,000. Less than 2 hours remained before Lily's surgery deadline. The phone rang again. It was the captain. "Beth, I saw you release the hostages. That was incredibly brave. I have good news. The fundraiser is growing fast. Over 200,000 donations in under an hour. You've touched the heart of the country." Beth closed her eyes, let out a sob. "Will she live?" "Yes. We'll transfer the funds directly to the hospital as soon as the goal is reached. But I need you to come out now, slowly, hands visible. Everything's ready to receive you. It's going to be okay." Beth thought of Lily. Her curly hair, her soft laugh, her colorful drawings, her tiny voice saying, "I love you, Mommy." She held the phone, walked to the bank door, and took a deep breath. Outside, a crowd had gathered behind the police line. TV cameras, locals, strangers holding signs that read, "Save Lily." Any mother would do the same. Beth unlocked the door and stepped out with her hands raised empty. Her face was soaked with tears. The crowd held its breath. Police approached slowly. One officer gently placed handcuffs on her, without aggression. They picked up the toy gun from the bank floor and realized it wasn't real. She never wanted to hurt anyone. And then, the reporter announced loudly, "The fundraiser has passed $300,000. The crowd erupted in applause. Beth collapsed to her knees, sobbing in relief. She had done it. Beth walked out of the bank with her hands raised, her body light, as if she had left behind all the chains of the world, except one, which would now close around her. The crowd saw her surrender. The siren softened its piercing wail into a curtain of murmurs. Cameras turned to her. Her face, marked by exhaustion and tears, became the symbol of a mother willing to do anything. Someone shouted, "Save Lily!" and the applause blended with the restrained sobs of those who, from afar, understood what that woman had done. The officers led her carefully. There were no shouts, no unnecessary violence. "She's a mother," some of the officers whispered. Captain Lewis, who had followed the story from the beginning, stood beside her, visible, trying to protect what could still be preserved, her dignity. Beth didn't resist. There was no strength left to fight fate. Only a sliver of hope remained. Lily would live. The money from the fundraiser was already being transferred to the hospital. What she had done had broken rules, yes, but it had also awakened something no one had expected. An entire city recognized that a mother's love can become a cry loud enough to break through the silence of ignorance. At the police station, the air was heavy. In a narrow room with a flickering fluorescent light, Beth was questioned.
It was a formal procedure, a policeman asking mechanical questions, but every eye in that room knew the story was much bigger. She answered in a low voice, steady in what needed to be said. She took full responsibility. She told the story again. She didn't try to hide the truth. She explained the layoff, the robbery, the hospital, the surgery, the timing. She spoke of her daughter. She spoke of the billionaire who discarded her like trash. She spoke of the toy gun, which had served only to make the world look. And in the end, she said, "I didn't want to hurt anyone. I just wanted a chance to save my daughter." The clerk wrote down every word. The press was already there. Some reports focused on the robbery, others on a mother's sacrifice. In the station's hallways, the phone rang non-stop. The local news had already updated their headline, "The Mother Who Broke the City's Silence to Save Her Daughter." There was a theater of tension. Among judges, journalists, police, and citizens, a beam of compassion insisted on shining. An emergency custody hearing was scheduled. The prosecution would have to decide whether Beth would remain in pretrial detention or if there was an alternative. The city watched. In cafes, newsrooms, and on the streets, people whispered, "She's not a common criminal. What if it were your mother? The surgery's paid for. Lily can live. What do we do with her mistake?" The media began digging deeper. Beth's life before desperation, her childhood, her sacrifices. The narrative, once one-dimensional, now expanded into human shades. The billionaire, who had initially ignored Beth's pleas, began to feel the public's gaze. Old reports resurfaced with past statements. People muttered about his coldness. In local social media groups, one persistent question echoed, how could someone with so much money not help a woman who cared for his home and was now desperate to save her child? His advisors whispered the situation was getting out of control. His image, the man who had turned Beth away, was beginning to crack under silent pressure, not only from guilt, but from something more pragmatic: reputation, exposure, the catalyzing empathy that was turning Beth's story into an uncomfortable mirror of his own faded humanity. Meanwhile, Lily was in the hospital. The fundraiser had surpassed $300,000, the doctors had been notified with funds guaranteed, and the team was preparing her for surgery. News of Beth's surrender in custody ran parallel to the hope that the operation would succeed. Amidst it all, one person watched with a heavy heart: Mara. Mara worked in the mansion's kitchen. Quiet, always attentive to detail, not one to talk much, but with the kind of gaze that noticed more than it let on. A few months ago, when Beth still had a roof over her head, Mara saw how she tried to make everything perfect in the guest wing. The care with which she packed her daughter's snacks, the little notes she tucked into her pockets. One day, upon learning Lily was sick, Mara left an extra bowl of soup in Beth's cabinet with a note, "If you ever need anything, leave it on the counter. I'll watch over you." Beth had never responded. She was ashamed to receive help, but she kept the note like a jewel. Now, after hearing the story on the local news, Mara felt a jolt in her chest. The city's blindfold didn't let it see the obvious. Beth needed someone to care for Lily while she paid the price for her courage. Mara was the first to approach the girl's mother. She found out through the hospital that Lily was being prepped. She went to the station and asked to speak to Beth. "You don't need to apologize," Mara said softly. Standing for hours on the other side of the glass, Beth, her eyes swollen, her face marked, could hardly believe that quiet figure was there. "Lily has someone. I'll take care of her."
That night, after the hearing, Beth was sent to a provisional detention unit, but with lenient conditions. The judge, moved by the story, and under the quiet pressure of a system that didn't quite know how to treat a mother who broke the law out of love, allowed her to remain in custody with legal representation, promising a slow process and a defense that would argue for extraordinary circumstances. It wouldn't be an easy acquittal. The mistake was there, but the story had changed. It was no longer just a criminal case, but a question of justice caught between the strictness of the law and the mercy of understanding. In her cell, time was different. Hours were made of the distant smell of food, the sound of the guard's footsteps, the heavy door closing,
the muffled cries of other inmates, and the most painful silence, her daughter's absence. Beth lay on the cold floor, wrapped in a thin blanket, and let her body collapse. But her mind didn't stop. She saw Lily drawing, imagined her face waking from anesthesia, longed to be there, holding her hand. She sifted through memories, her mother who died alone, and her daughter, who might now have a chance. Mara never left the girl alone. At the home of a childhood friend of Beth's, an old neighbor who'd known her mother and, by a twist of fate, had been contacted by a distant relative aware of the story, the situation stabilized around Lily. The friend, Anna, was a woman with a steady gaze, who'd grown up witnessing the struggles of the region's women. She welcomed Lily as her own. Meanwhile, Mara moved between the hospital and the small home, bringing the new drawings Lily made of Mommy and me saving the world, and the story she told about when Mommy comes back. Even in her weakness, Lily had a serene strength. In the pre-op bed, she held the nurse's hand and whispered, "Mommy's coming back. Mommy is a hero." The medical team, silently, exchanged glances. The surgery was complex, a rare tumor in a delicate part of the brain, causing bleeding and pain. There were risks, there always are. But the money was there. The city had rallied, and hour by hour, Lily's name spread further, now with small videos of classmates drawing hearts for the little girl being saved by her mom. Outside the prison, a quiet current of solidarity grew. People brought letters to Beth through a mailbox at the public defender's office. One, written by a mother, read, "Never think what you did was wrong. The world that made you believe there was no way out is the same one trying to punish you for trying to escape it. Hold on. Your daughter will live." That night, doctors performed the surgery. Long hours passed, where each move required surgical precision. Anesthesia was administered, and Lily slipped into deep sleep. In her cell, Beth received an update through a social worker who bridged prison and family. A small device to relay only the most vital news. Mara read the message on the other hand, heart in her throat. When the operation ended, the lead doctor sent a short note via official protocol. The surgery was a technical success. Recovery will be slow, but we are optimistic. She is in the ICU, under observation. We must be patient. Beth didn't know whether to cry from relief or guilt. She sat on the floor, hugged her knees, and whispered, "You're alive, my little one. Please stay. I'll pay. I'll do whatever it takes. I promise." In the city, headlines had shifted tone. A quiet pressure grew, now with voices urging the story to be seen in deeper layers. Some questioned how could the system punish a mother who saved a life while committing a crime to do it. Some argued forgiveness couldn't come automatically, but many, with tears in their eyes, offered time and support so Beth could have a better lawyer, a real chance to show her humanity. The billionaire watched between the lines. A local radio host posed a question aloud. If the man who fired and evicted Beth had shown even a gesture of help, would this story have become a scandal or a symbol of redemption? The same man who once saw Beth as disposable felt something inside him crack. He sat alone in his mansion's living room, watching the same report showing Lily's fragile eyes. It wasn't just about public image. There was an old echo, a memory of a mother he never knew, a childhood he hadn't escaped. What to do with that discomfort? It was too late to fix the past, but maybe in the future he could choose whether he'd be part of the judgment or of the healing. For now, he stayed silent. Every night, Mara wrote a brief note for Beth, delivered through the public defender's office. Simple. She woke up. She smiled today. Anna let you draw me with a superhero cape. She calls you her hero. Breathe, Beth. I'm here.
And so, while the world turned between looming judgment, delicate recovery, and a city starting to see in all this a chance to redefine what justice with compassion means, Beth waited. She didn't know the final price she would pay, but she knew, painfully clearly, that she had saved a life. And that life, Lily, was now the brightest light in a time of shadows.
Time passed slowly inside the prison. The days were all the same, gray, silent, heavy. But Beth found a single ray of light in the letters she received from Mara, always bringing good news about Lily. The girl's recovery was slow but miraculous. Little by little, the sparkle returned to her eyes. She began to walk again, to laugh, to draw hearts on colorful paper, and to ask to see her mother. Beth clutched each letter tightly, as if it were her daughter's heartbeat pulsing in her hands. Inside the prison, she became a kind of silent legend. The other inmates respected her story. They knew she wasn't a common criminal. She was a mother, a woman who had loved so much she crossed every boundary for it. Years passed. 3, to be exact. When the day of her release came, Beth didn't know what to expect. It had been so long since she'd seen the world beyond the bars. Life had moved on out there, but she still carried the weight of that day. The day she ran desperately through the city, not knowing how to come up with $300,000 while her daughter's life slipped through her fingers. When she walked out of prison, no one was waiting at the gate. No reporters, no curious onlookers. The case was no longer news. But there was a black car, discreet, with tinted windows. And inside, a man she never expected to see again. Alexander Huxley, the billionaire, her former boss. Beth froze. Her heart pounded. The same man who turned his back when she begged for help was here. Alexander stepped out of the car slowly. He wasn't wearing a suit or that arrogant expression she remembered. He wore simple clothes and had a look of shame. In one hand, he held an envelope. In the other, a white orchid. "Beth," he said, his voice trembling. I know I have no right, but I need to ask your forgiveness." Beth said nothing. The cold morning wind touched her face. She could feel the pulse of anger and sorrow inside her chest, but she stayed silent. "I saw you as I see numbers, statistics, a problem to avoid. Only after everything happened, when I saw what you did for your daughter, what you faced, the price you paid, I realized how inhumane I had been. I haven't slept peacefully since." He held out the envelope. "This is an apology, but it's more than that." Beth carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter and a contract. Alexander continued. "I created an institution for children in medical emergencies, with immediate, free care, a transplant wing, access to surgeons, psychologists, and family support, and I want you to be the director." Beth's eyes widened. It felt like the ground disappeared beneath her feet. "Me? Why?" "Because no one understands better than you what it feels like to look into the eyes of a sick child and know no one will help. You've lived with so many mothers suffer in silence. This institution needs someone with heart. And I believe you still have yours." Beth held the letter. Her hands trembled. She thought of everything she had been through, the dirty prison floor, the blank stares of the authorities, the coldness of the courtroom, Mara's voice saying Lily had survived. She thought of Lily. "I need to see my daughter first," she said, eyes full of tears. Alexander nodded. He already knew where the girl was. 30 minutes later, Beth walked into a modest school on the outskirts of the city. It was recess. Children were running everywhere, and in the middle of them,
A little girl with braids and a yellow dress was jumping rope. It was Lily. When she saw her mother, Lily dropped everything and ran into her arms, as if no time had passed. Beth held her tightly against her chest. They both cried in silence beneath the blue sky of a new beginning. 6 months later, the new institution opened its doors under the name Lily's House. Beth led the project with tireless dedication. Now she was the one comforting desperate mothers. She was the one holding children's hands in waiting rooms. She was the one wiping tears and saying, "It's going to be okay. I know how much it hurts, but it will pass." Alexander funded everything, but stayed away from the day-to-day operation. He knew the place wasn't about him. It was about redemption, about turning pain into something that blossoms. And so, a woman who was once imprisoned for trying to save a life now saved dozens of lives every month. Beth never asked for applause or headlines, but everyone knew there was an ordinary woman there with an extraordinary love. A woman who once challenged the impossible and won. Not all heroes wear capes. Sometimes they wear simple uniforms, have calloused hands, tired eyes, and a faith no one can extinguish. Beth didn't just save her daughter, she changed the course of many lives. Because a mother's heart, when moved by love, can tear down any wall, even the wall of the system itself. And you, what would you do for love? Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more emotional and unexpected life stories like this one. See you in the next story.